Welcome to the Dive Into Reiki podcast. Today, my guest, it took weeks to schedule this interview. It was the summer. We were both traveling a lot, and I'm incredibly grateful that we were able to actually connect. Her name is Marie Kyoko Morohoshi. She was born to Japanese immigrant parents, and Marie is a sacred activist and queer Nisei, which means second generation Japanese American Reiki master and teacher. Her Reiki practice is informed by years of Zen, Chado, which is the way of tea, and Ikebana, which is the way of flowers, training that she received while growing up. Marie is based on the West Coast and has participated in key social justice movements such as Standing Rock, and I'm going to mispronounce the following words, so I apologize, Mauna Wākea, and Run for Salmon, bringing her healing work to those in need. Marie is dedicated to training members of the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities, as well as white allies in Reiki, focusing on holistic nature-based approach that reconnects students with the practice's shamanic and Buddhist origins. Her unique retreats combine Reiki with Shinto, Shugendo, and Lakota purification rituals, an organic and syncretic approach to reconnecting their true selves. These practices help prepare any students or seasoned practitioner of Reiki to simply be Reiki. And we have an amazing conversation about Marie's upbringing, her journey in Reiki, her training, and also race and gender and identification. So if any of these subjects may be triggering for you, you may be sensitive to them, please take into consideration. We really approach our conversation with a very open heart and open mind. And part of the Dive Into Reiki podcast mission is to really bring a very diverse range of voices. So if you're a person from a community that has not been very represented in the Reiki media, podcasts, online summits, please reach out. Some of the baselines is you do have to have practiced Reiki as a teacher, preferably 8 to 10 years. Really have a deep practice and practice every day, and have a little bit of a story that is a little bit unique. So either how you work with your community or what you write, and some reflections you may have, or you work in healthcare or helping in community centers. So that is a little bit the baseline, and not everybody, obviously, I don't have the time to interview every wonderful people that are doing so much beautiful work. Again, reach out to me if you feel your community has not been represented. We really want to show the tapestry, the rich tapestry that is Reiki practice in the world. And it's really fortunate, it's a gift for me to be able to support that in any way. You can obviously reach out to me through Instagram, through my website, Dive Into Reiki, and also through my Patreon that also helps support this podcast. It's patreon.com/dive into Reiki. And if you want to support the work we do, please, it's just $3 a month. You can really help with the cost of hosting, editing, and all the software involved. My time is my donation, is my passion. So I really love doing this. But any support also means that you really appreciate this work and you want it to keep happening in the future. So it's a way of saying, yes, Nathalie, we like the podcast. Please keep going. Is a little bit of fuel for me spiritually and energetically as well. So again, I'm going to put the links on the podcast as well as the links to Marie, so you can reach out to her. But the link for the podcast and to support it is patreon.com/dive into Reiki. And now on with the interview. Welcome, Marie, to the Dive Into Reiki podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
So excited to be with you, Nathalie. I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, and for the people listening, we had a pre-interview. We had a little chat a few weeks ago, and we really had a great time. It was amazing to get to know you, and I can't wait for people to actually get to know you better as well. Today, I'm very dyslexic, so bear with me. So I wanted to start this interview like I start every interview, and it's a little bit of how you came into contact with Reiki, but also a little bit of your spiritual background, the one you grew up with.
Yes. So growing up, it wasn't like a straight up spirituality, but in the early days of my life, when I'm like 3, 4, 5 years old, I remember very clearly, like, my parents would have incense burning, and there would be like a scroll you know, and it was just a regular part of the household. And, you know, I thought, oh, something very mysterious and interesting about that. You know, I couldn't read Japanese at the time. I didn't know what it said, but later on, I came to understand. Well, I also went to this spiritual camp. It's called Seicho no Ie, and a lot of the Japanese kids would go there. And it's actually one of the spin-offs from the Japanese new religions that were popping up in the late 1800s in Japan, which, you know, Usui Sensei was a part of,
Yes.
right? And so it's a splinter, and it's one of the larger ones here in the US. And I remember it was interesting. They were testing our intuition. So once there was like a big hallway, I mean, a big auditorium, and one side of the room, the kids would be split on the one half, and the other half would sit on the other side. And we had to sit quietly and meditate, and we had to figure one side of the group, one group had to have an image, like, you know, like say it was like a teapot or something. And then they had to transmit that image to the other side of the room, and the other kids had to figure out what it was, you know?
And that's your summer camp. I love
Yeah,
that.
that's my summer camp.
So jealous.
Yeah, you can look it up. It's called Seicho no Ie. It's one of the bigger factions that came from the new religions out of Japan during that time. Yeah. So that was like, you know, that's like one aspect. And then this is like we're in the middle of we were just renovating her house, and all these old scripts were coming out, and they look like sacred texts. And I'm like, what is this? She had it all wrapped up like a, you know, very neatly with, you know, writing on there. And she said, oh yeah, those are the writings and the teachings from Seicho no Ie. Remember when you went to camp there? Remember you would go off? I was like, yeah. So I opened it up, and it was so interesting because when I opened it up, guess what character showed up? Give you one guess.
Yeah.
They.
They. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. You know, so I'm like, so the connections, you know what I mean? From my childhood to like this current day. And this is just, I'm talking like a couple months ago, I opened up these scriptures, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so there's that aspect of it. And then the spiritual part, well, you know, Japanese culture is very spiritual, right? And so growing up with my family, which was in a very tight-knit Japanese, first, second, third, even fourth generation Japanese American, and then having to go to Japanese school from the time I was like, you know, I think 5 or 6. And it was also my first language. Like my mom still does not speak English to this day. So we speak
Oh,
Japanese.
wow.
Oh yeah, that's another long story. She didn't want to come to this country. You know, it was arranged marriage. She was anti, you know, the bombs. She was dodging bombs, American US bombs
Yeah.
in Japan. And so she did not want to come here. She was very anti-US. I think that was part of her like, well, I'm not going to speak English. So, but then she ended up in this very tight-knit Japanese American community. So she didn't really have to speak it. So I ended up translating, like I'm still translating, to this very day
Wow.
for her. Yeah. So, and she's a very strict, she was a very strict mother. So I had to attend, Japanese school from like Monday to Friday, every hour, like after public school, and then Saturdays. And that's when I did the tea ceremony and the Ikebana and the calligraphy. And so that went on up until I moved to San Francisco and I was like 21. So
Wow.
it was kind of like embedded pretty like deeply, consistently, intensely for a minute. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
love because it's like I'm seeing this almost like the potting soil for like that seed of Reiki to fall in. Because
Mm.
about new religion for the people who are not familiar with that, that really was when Mikao Usui was growing up, like and creating Reiki, he was very influenced by that. Actually, a
Yeah.
lot of the precepts as affirmation comes a little bit from that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting because, like even in Chado, when I did tea ceremony practice, like we would sit on these like large tatamis, and then you're facing the 3 teachers. I remember, and it was very like formal and strict, and we have to get our precepts out and read all 4 of them, out loud. It was very formal. It was very formal training, but it's very it's similar to like Reiki. Like we have to read the precepts, the Gokai, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities, but tea ceremony, of course, was like in the 1500s. Urasenke came way before.
Yeah, a lot. But
But Usui Sensei obviously influenced by his environment.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and also the culture, right? Like you were telling me you practiced tea ceremony for years and you're still not a master, right? So this
No.
culture of repetition, I think, of repetition to get the nuances and the subtleties, I
Oh
think
yeah.
you had it growing up.
How was it growing up with the tea ceremony? Is that your question?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, because because my mom had the insight to get me started early, it really became a very dense like weave, part of the fabric of who I am. So it impacts it impacts everything I do. So even like it could be like the way I'm washing my dishes. The way I wash my dishes, the forks and the utensils, it's like I'm doing the chashaku, like I'm wiping the chashaku with the cloth. I do it the same way. Or if I wipe the inside, I take a sponge inside the bowl, I'm doing the character no. Like it's just because I've done it 5 million times, right? Or the way I wipe the water basin, it's like the same way, and it's not even conscious. It's all the training, it's the repetition. So it's like the doing with not doing. I don't know, you know what I mean?
And
It's
it's funny because we talked the other day, but now you saying it like this, like I almost imagine like you were growing up in a tiny Japan and then boom, you actually, when you grow up, you realize you're in a different country, right?
oh, that's funny you say that because like up until high school, I went to a high school that was predominantly had a lot of Japanese Americans, not necessarily a lot of Japanese speaking ones, but Japanese American nonetheless. So by the time I went to college, I was like, oh, there's other Asians, Chinese, is Korean, oh, there's white people. I grew up with one of my best friends was white, and so she was
Yeah.
like a hippie family. So I had an interesting juxtaposition of a very strict Japanese, like first generation immigrant cultural upbringing. That's even some people have said even it's more intense. So I had Japanese people tell me, "Oh yeah, your training was more intense than my training." I mean, growing up in Japan, but they were more westernized, in some way because my mom, immigrants when they come to this country, it's kind of like time freezes. And, it's like, oh, that's the old Japan, or that's the old Hong Kong. Hong Kong has changed, or Tokyo has changed so much. Japan has changed so much. So there's that freeze frame of a way of life that stays in the immigrant's life here in the US. So I feel like I was in that mix, So to come out all of a sudden, it's like, wow, there's all these other people. Yes, absolutely.
I love that. So then you were like in these summer camps, obviously, and discovering this character Ray. And again, for the people listening, there were a lot at the time of Mikao Sui, like a lot of groups are doing energy healing with Ray, right? And groups like that. So it's
Yeah,
pretty common. So how did you discover Reiki? How did you go? Because you left your house, you
yeah.
discovered white people, and then how did Reiki?
Now I grew up with another white hippie family, so I'm not so out there.
No, no, I'm joking. I'm joking. That was
Yeah,
like
I know,
totally
right?
teasing
Yeah,
you.
yeah, 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 yeah. Let's see. So prior to actually formally learning Reiki and having my upbringing in the Gardena Buddhist church, actually, it was very Buddhist. Like the vibe was very Buddhist at the Japanese school for sure. I mean, I would see like the priest running around in his robes and all that. But prior to
So
my formal
jealous.
training in it, huh?
So jealous.
Oh, don't be jealous. Don't be jealous. So I was part of a at the time Angel Kyoto Williams, who was my partner, we co-founded a Zen-based urban monastery. We're mostly activists of color here in Oakland, California. So it was she ran the tight ship. It's steeped mostly in Dinsai Zen. So we did it was a lot of form, a lot of zazen. And having lived there, I still had my place in San Francisco, but I would only come here on the weekends. But every day, zazen, yoga, the sweeping the hallways, and mindful eating and all of that. We did this for like 7, 8 years. And
Wow.
so yeah, and so that it just occurred to me, there's a cycle in astrology where it's like it takes 7 years for a full cycle. You get a little itch and you're like, okay, am I doing the right thing? You're kind of turning the corner at 7 years. It's like
Yes.
and you're thinking, okay, do I keep going to second base or am I going to totally do something different? you know. Well, I turned first base after 7 years, and I did, you know, I completed doing the holding space, and it was a beautiful community too, but holding space for the sangha and the practice and the container and all of it. And then I got to bring in my tea ceremony and my Ikebana practice in there too. So that was amazing. But you know, so it was all leading up to like I wanted something deeper, something, and something in me said, oh, maybe some kind of healing practice. And I thought, and then Reiki popped up on my radar. But interestingly enough, I couldn't really find a teacher that I could connect with here in the Bay. So I just said, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to keep pushing this. The right teacher will come up at the right time. I'm going to release this for now. And I found Chinese and Japanese acupressure. So I studied that for a few years. And then after I finished that, that's when 1 year, and I take an annual trek to Geneva, because that's where one of my best friends lives, and my godsons are there. And she picked me up at the airport, and she's like, Marie, girl, I just finished this amazing course on Reiki, level 1 and 2. You have to check it out. It is so you. It's for you. You got to go. I'm going to pay for it. You have no choice. You're going to stay with me, and you're going to go to this thing. So that's how I ended up learning about Reiki. And then once I got to class, it was on. It was definitely on. I really resonated with the teacher. You know, she was part Mongolian and part Chinese. Jacqueline Tail, super badass shamanic, Reiki teacher and human being. And we connected right away. And then I noticed she was kind of paying attention to me a little bit extra. I'm like, oh, what's that about? And she was like, even before the class started, she goes, oh, do you speak Japanese, by the way? I said, yeah, a little bit, humble pie, chotto, a little bit. And she said, well, can you just read the precepts in Japanese to us? And I was like, oh, sure, no problem. I did that. And then during one of the first attunement in class, she asked me to after she did the attunement, she was sitting right in front of me, and she was kneeling, and it was a wrap, and it was done. And I'm just kind of looking around like, okay, are we finished? And then she's just sitting there kneeling in front of me, and I'm on the chair. And then she just asks me, can you give me a blessing? And I'm just like, what is she talking to me? And I'm looking around the room like, is somebody else in the room? Maybe she's talking to somebody else.
Yeah, because
She
you're the
possibly
student,
can't.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, this is kind of awkward, and I already have another spiritual practice as well. I'm very steeped in the as a guest, I'm steeped in the Lakota, Sundance teachings. And so so I'm not going to get way into it right now, but so I gave her a blessing. And then later on, she pulled me aside out of the class, and she said, before each class, I always check in with my guides to see who the elder is. And then she said, and I've been told it is you. And I'm like, oh, because, and then she's like, do you mind if I announce that to the class? And I really didn't want her to announce it at all. I didn't.
Yeah, you were telling me that you had some resistance to being the elder. Yes.
Yeah, and I still do. Yes, I forget I'm the elder. I know I don't look as old as people might think that I am, but yeah, so I was very resistant, but I said, fine, go ahead, announce it. I don't care. Yeah, it's okay. And then before that, I forgot to tell you the story of the staff. So yeah, so after we had our, one-on-one Reiki sessions, and we had our attunement, she has us go outside, and there's all these nice cedar trees out there. And so when I was communing with the cedar trees out there, I came upon what was clearly to me a staff, and I had a like feeling in my chest go, oh my God, that's a staff. And I'm like, I'm doing this, kind of like the same thing I did in the room with Jacqueline when she said, give me a blessing. I'm kind of doing this. I don't know why I'm doing this. Is anybody watching? Does anybody see me? Like, I feel like I have some Scorpio, so maybe it's like I'm gonna go hide or something. I don't know. I don't want to be seen. Something like, you know what I mean?
I know Scorpio, so I know how that feels. Yeah.
Yes, because that's why you call it Dive Into Reiki, because you're a deep diver, Nathalie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at the staff like, I'm not going to pick that up. And then, there's a voice that says, oh no, you're picking that up, Marie. And my resistance is saying, everything in me is like, no, I am not picking that up. And then the voice keeps persisting, like, oh no, you're going to pick that up. So, I finally surrender. I pick it up and I look around and make sure nobody sees me. I go hide it. And then that's when the teacher confronts me right after she tells me she's going to announce that I'm the elder of the class, that she's asking me about that staff that was in the hallway. Like, where is it? Have you seen it? I'm like, oh my God, how does she know? How does she know there was the staff over there? And so I admitted it. I said, yeah, I know where it is. She was like, well, where is it? And I said, it's at home. And then she was like, well, you need to bring that back. And I'm like, why? And she's like, oh, because you're going to lead the sacred walk. Yeah. At the Versoix River, So I'm just like, gosh, So there's all this resistance around all these like assignments, all these like, oh, you're going to do this and you need to do that. And can you do this? And that's been has been, not now, but it's for the first part of my spiritual path. Earlier part was a lot of resistance, Yeah.
I love that you actually knew what to do. If someone had asked me on the Reiki 1 class, give me a blessing or lead the walk, I would have literally been like, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I think that's how spirit works, right? It's like not about you.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, we need to get out of the way, right? We
yeah.
need to get out of our own way to be in service of the greater good. So having understood that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to shut up and just take my assignments in. And so, kind of fake it till you make it till you finally get to the place of like, okay, I'm doing this, right? So that introduction to Reiki was about like, yes, you're going to pick up this lineage, you're going to pick up this practice, and it's not about you, and it's a very sacred walk. That was a big takeaway. Like, oh, this is huge. Like when I was first exploring Reiki, I was just thinking, oh, healing technique, yeah, Japanese healing modality, sure, my people, yeah, let me go check it out. But this was like a whole other thing that I was not expecting.
It also was the right training. My first training was a woman who gave me a training for 4 hours. She could barely do an attunement. And
Oh,
it was like literally was the weirdest training. And some people now just give an attunement and a manual. So I think the beauty is like destiny. You had to wait, but you had the right training, right?
right. So that's why it was good to just because I stopped looking. I was like, okay, you know what? This is too much struggle involved here. If it's this hard, it's not meant to be right now. I'm just gonna put it on the shelf over here, and when the time is right, then it just blew up. All right.
No, but I love because just from your life story already, two very important lessons, right? Like release, let
Yeah,
go, and then get out of the way. It's not about you. I love that.
yeah. All the teachings are bang, 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 right in there, right? All the ducks are in order. Boom, 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 boom. They just come like that.
That is so gorgeous. So from there, you did your Reiki 1, Reiki 2. What happened next?
Oh, yeah. What happened next? Then talk about boom, boom, boom. So I come back and it's kind of on. It's like, oh yeah, she got a training. Let's put sticker over there, and then we're gonna sticker over there, and la. And I had I had just started, well, I would say not just, but I'd been growing sacred tobacco for my Lakota Sundance community. So I had these like huge tobacco offerings, right? And I wanted to meet this particular medicine man at this water ceremony, and I brought the tobacco with me and as an offering. And there was a connection between meeting him and having my first Reiki client come in. And also, I mean, this is kind of out. I know this sounds a little out there, but I'm just gonna say this.
Practice Reiki. You can be out there.
It was out there. So you know how they talk about light beings? Some
Yes.
some traditions talk about light beings, and if you look at the more esoteric writings, there are light beings present with spirit, right? And your ancestors come through as a light being. So during this time, I just come back from my training, and I met this medicine man with the tobacco medicine, and then I was taking a picture of myself. And I don't do selfies at all, but my friend just came back from Hawaii and I had this lady. I took a picture and I remember seeing this blue light enter the bottom of my iPhone. And I mean, I clocked it, but I didn't think anything of it. And then I looked at the picture later on that night. I'm at my house by myself. And I'm in my room and I'm looking and I see this light, blue. Clearly it's a blue entity. It's a person with like all these white feathers, you know,
Oh.
and it freaked me out at the time because I wasn't really versed in that world at all at the time. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit, but this blue being came and I was told by the clairvoyant that I was seeing at the time that they're one of my guides. And so Jacqueline didn't teach us anything about guides, but you know, she does this whole shamanic thing that's separate, but she didn't really bring that into the Reiki training, although she incorporates both. But I started to feel like all these tools were coming in. And then a client, one of my friends came in and she was just diagnosed with cancer. And so right away, I went into like a lot of my clients that I manifested were almost all cancer patients. Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah. So I went in pretty deep and heavy right away. And when I was in Mount Shasta, I wanted to get a singing bowl. This is like years ago. Not singing bowls are everywhere. This is years ago. And I wanted to get this one singing bowl. And the Beverly who owned the store, she was like, "Oh no, Marie, it doesn't work that way. The way it works is that it picks you. So we have to see if there's one here that wants to go home with you." So I had this whole other idea. I wanted this one. And she was like, "It's not that one. The one that's for you is this one over here. And it's a D sharp." And I'm like, "Oh, D sharp." So I don't know if you believe, you know, in the whole.
I believe it. I know sound is very healing, but I don't know what frequency is for weight. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like,
so D
what's up with that?
corresponds to the sacral, right?
Oh, okay.
E is the solar plexus. Mine was a D sharp, so it's a half note above. So that goes into the solar plexus. So it integrates D and E. So it integrates your sacral with your solar. And sure enough, that singing bowl was for my client Leslie, because that's where she had her cancer.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would go into the hospitals with her during her chemo appointments with my singing bowl. And then the Kaiser staff or the CPMC staff would be like, "Oh, there's a singing bowl lady." And they loved it. They loved it. They loved it that I bring it in. I was just ringing it, you know, and I would just ring it and hold her, you know, hold her sacral and her solar during the whole time she was getting her chemo infusion. So that was my first like client. And
Oh,
it just
wow.
went, everything came in super deep, but all these medicines and all these like this light being and this medicine man came through, and that's a whole other story, but you know, it all came together. So I felt like, you know, like spirit said, "Okay, we're going to put you in this lane, and then we're going to line up these little tools, boop, 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 with this client, boop, and that tool, and okay, go, it's on."
I just love how everything seems to build up all towards this, mission that you have. I
Yeah,
also wanted to
everything is
talk
spirit
because,
led. Yeah,
yeah, you
yeah,
mentioned also that, you practice Native American spiritual practices and how
yeah.
that has informed a little bit your Reiki practice and especially the concept of purification as well.
Yeah, great question. Great question, Natalie. So in Japanese culture, or like like in Shintoism, that purification, misogi, for example, is a
Yeah.
huge, important practice, very important practice, which I incorporate, in my trainings. So the beautiful thing about the Lakota way or indigenous practices of Turtle Island in general is their deep reverence for nature and their ability to see the connection and feel into all things. So, there's a phrase, mitakuye oyasin, which means all our relations. So whether it's the water, the rocks, the trees, the soil, the fire, the air, all the elements, it's all connected. And they deeply like give, deep reverence for that. And guess who else has? I mean, most indigenous cultures do, but I know in Japanese culture, we also do
Very
too.
strong. Yeah,
Very
everywhere.
strong. Oh my God, huge. It's like we center our like whole, sensibility and lives around a tree, for example. We won't knock down the tree. We will build around it. We'll build the,
Yeah, the
structure
architecture, the
around the tree.
landscaping, everything. And still
Yeah.
in modern Japan, that is still true. Like they may be
Oh,
changing, but that is still true. Yeah.
totally, totally. So it was already an organic connection there, you
Yeah.
know? So in my training, we do both kinds of we do purification in the Shinto Shugendo way, which is like the Takegyo waterfall way. And we also do it, and that's glacial melt water, so it's butt freezing. So that's not comfortable, but boy, does it liberate you. Does it free you from your stuff? You can't really be thinking about anything else. Same thing with the sweat lodge. So last year we were gifted with the opportunity to do a lodge. So
Cool.
that's another form of purification where you meet your edge, where you have to, like, this time it's heat, right? It's not glacial melt, cold water. It is like hot, 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 where you feel like, you could just scream, and you have to really sit with. And that's why it's great to have like Joshin Kokuhyo and all this breathwork practices to help you move through those really uncomfortable places to get to that edge and break through and be like, oh, this is who I am, right? Because we're all going for our, like, remembering who we are. So here's all these practices of purification. So I really I feel like these practices have come to me, and I feel so blessed to be able to weave them together and incorporate that into the training so that we can be these clear vessels to, channel and be Reiki, so that, we can help others help, heal themselves, So all we have to do is just show up, really, if you've gone through all of that, you're just being that, and energy's energy. So, it's contagious. So, if you feel my vibe, then, great. I feel your vibe, great. We're just like hanging out together. We don't even have to do Reiki. We're just hanging out together.
It happens. Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes we just try so hard and we just need to literally be present. But you
Yeah,
were saying
absolutely.
something and I loved it. And I had never seen it like that, right? Like I have a trouble with like heat, extreme heat when I go to saunas and stuff. It's very hard to get. But
Mm.
what you said about like learning how to go through uncomfortable
Oh, yeah.
moments, to be able to cleanse. And I see more and more the people around me, like we are, and I don't have any criticism against edible anything, but we take a lot of pills and edibles and everything to avoid
Oh,
any
right,
uncomfortable feelings, right?
right,
And then
right.
sometimes we go to Reiki because that's going to release the bad things without doing anything and not being uncomfortable. And when I hear it's like, well, we cannot really cleanse or advance or find our light if we don't go through those uncomfortable moments. So I
Yeah,
love those purification practices because it's also like, it's a welcome, like, hi, this is the practice. Someday it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's good because you're going to
yes.
come across the other side. So I mean, it's just you talk, and then my brain is like, woo,
Ooh,
excited. Yeah.
you should come to Mount Shasta.
Hey, one day.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing because once you break through that discomfort, you really do come through shining, And it's that deep exhale, like, oh, I'm on the other side of it. And thank God, I mean, it's amazing, like watching the students be very resistant going, like walking into the waterfall, or, going into any situation that feels very like going into the sweat lodge. You could feel the collective trepidation, like, but once they're in it, you give them the practices to stay put and to work through it, and to hang in there long enough so that you come out shiny and new. I mean, I had one student, she was screaming through the whole thing while she was under the waterfalls, and she was the most quiet person in the retreat.
I love
She
that.
barely said a word, and everybody went, "Who's that?"
But that's good, right? You're supposed to like
Yes.
repeat and scream mantras anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the beauty of it is, because you're in a sangha, you have a sort of like the pressure, like, well, everybody else is doing it, I got to do it too. Because trust me, left to your own devices, you probably will not do it. You just won't. There's a very high likely chance you won't do it. But if everybody else is doing it, oh my God, I guess I better do it. And, and thank God you did it.
Yeah.
You got a little more free, and you got a little bit closer to, like, oh, my true self.
No, I love that. And you were saying also like how you bring those practices at the beginning so people are more present during the training as well, right?
Oh,
So if
yeah.
you can talk a little bit about that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I live in San Francisco, on occupied Yalama lands, and any city in New York, hello, very dense, so we have all this sludge, and I just feel like, how can we get into practicing, going into a deep spiritual practice when we have so much sludge? It's going to take a while to unpack some of that. So I do feel like it's a good way to sort of bring people up to speed, to get clear and open and available and present if we do take them through these purification practices. I mean, there's a reason why they've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know yeah, so that we can become more present, so we can become more available, so we can connect, all those things, so we can cleanse, open, connect, and drop in, and then you feel connected to everything. So I think it makes a big difference to do that practice in the beginning of any training. So, it could be as simple as like just doing meditation and breath work just to get everybody
Yeah.
to land. Because we're in the Western world, we're so like encouraged to be in our heads all the time. And it takes a while to unwind all that. So whatever it takes, whatever it takes.
Yeah, when you come to training in New York, like I have to do Choshin Kokyoho and like I a lot of breath work and stuff because they come from the subway, they're still on the phone. Like you
Yeah.
come to a studio and you're like, okay, give it to me fast so I can heal people. It's like, yeah, it's gonna take a little bit more work than that, right?
Yeah. Right. Slow your roll a little bit there.
Yeah, like just be present. Like you're so rushed, and it's interesting. And I love also, the fact that you plan your trains in a different way, right? So a lot of times when we learn Reiki, it's like this is you become a Reiki teacher. This is what you're supposed to do, but you are creating your own way to help people drop in, as you said.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, just like the Buddha said, right? Shakyamuni said, don't listen to me, just have your own direct experience. So
Exactly.
so to be honest, this whole training is based on my direct experience. I'm not doing anything that's like I read in a book, or like somebody said, some other teacher said, oh, you should do it this way. I mean, of course, I'm following, a particular curriculum that's, standard for all,
Yes.
Reiki trainings, but the parts that I've included are just aspects of my life that I've been doing on my own, whether in a sangha or in a Sundance community, or even doing like solo hiking trips that lead me to, Takigyo, the waterfall meditation.
Yeah.
These things are direct experiences that I've had that makes me go, oh, this worked for me. Maybe it might work for you, right?
And that's the beauty of so many
Try it.
teachers. But also, because we didn't practice or come up with Reiki in a vacuum, right? He had
Mm,
a lot of these practices and many similar to what you're offering. So I think it's super interesting. There is one more subject I wanted to talk. So when I started this podcast, I interview obviously like a lot of people who were like, very known in the Reiki world. But one thing I want is this podcast to be a platform for diversity, right? A
mm.
lot of times when we perceive or what we see in terms of book or in the media about Reiki is ironically very white.
Right.
So one of the things that you also are is very active in the BIPOC community, and I hope I pronounced it well this time. You were
Yes,
teaching me
BIPOC.
BIPOC.
Yes, Black, Indigenous, people of color.
Yes. So I
Yes,
wanted to talk a little bit about that because that community is very active in the world of Reiki. So how is like are you? I know you're training a lot of people and supporting that community quite a lot as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean that is my community. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the community that I come from, and being the sacred activist that I am, is my world is is queer, trans, cutie, BIPOC folks. So, and I'm like, oh, my friends want to learn this, and I'm in the Bay Area, a lot of cutie BIPOC folks here. And oftentimes I'll hear that, I've been interested in Reiki, but I didn't want to learn it from a white cis person. I want to learn it from a Japanese person, or at least minimum, a person of color, right? So I started thinking about, well, let me think about this. And I wanted to create a safe environment for these folks, our folks, to practice. And and that has made, I think, a huge difference in terms of like who gets to practice, who gets to teach, who's getting served. And my intention is to change the field of the Reiki, world in the West to have more BIPOC folks training and practicing. So you can't really, students oftentimes will not feel comfortable going to a white dominant, container, you know. I remember like even going to the San Francisco Zen Center, I'm like, it's steeped in, Suzuki Sensei's teachings, right?
Yes.
Written by a Japanese priest, right? And I'm Japanese. I roll up there, mostly everybody's white. And the vibe was so like, I was just kind of turned off because you're so cold. And it's not like Zen is cold. It could be cold, but it just, these folks were just not
Still with
welcome.
laughter.
I
Still
know, like
joyful. Yeah.
seriously, like joy, laughter, all the funsies,
Yes.
So I was, so I can understand the initial turnoff of like going into a space and going, oh, okay, this is like,
I have trouble going to Buddhist spaces in New York because of that. Because
yeah,
yes, I'm a white woman, but I'm also multicultural and I have an accent and I'm a different culture.
right,
So
right.
if I'm struggling with that, I can see everyone, other people
Yeah,
as
well,
well.
I'm Japanese and they're practicing Japanese Zen. So I'm like, excuse me, back up. Hold up
Exactly.
here. Hello.
I love
Don't
that.
get me started because I will go there.
Well, but
So,
I think it's also a conversation. Like I think like we all, and I think you say it's the safe space, right? It's wherever we feel safe.
yes. So,
And
yes,
that is something that every person defines and we have to respect. And I think that's the most important thing. Like
it
everybody
is.
will have a different space in which they want to train and be study. But I
Yeah.
think us as podcasts and everything, we have to reflect that this community is very diverse and is increasingly multiplying diverse and bringing beautiful people from every community. And I love that.
Yeah, as many people who can do it should have access to it. So, considering that there's limited access if it's the white cisgendered world of practitioners and teachers, BIPOC folks aren't going to necessarily feel comfortable. So the beauty of having like last year's space, everybody was queer, trans, and BIPOC, everyone. And I can't tell you how healing that was for everybody. I think they were surprised too. They were like, is this for real? Like we had like 23 people, and that's not what I could fit at the retreat center. But we were all queer, trans, BIPOC folks. And I think if I could give you an example of a difference of us going into a space that's mostly white, is that like, like the position of Zazen, you hold the form, right? And it
Yeah,
could be
yeah.
kind of tense. You could be kind of tense, but you get the techniques like in Reiki, you get the techniques, you hold the form. But if you don't feel safe, you're not going to drop into the form because you have to soften. You have
Yeah.
to soften after you have your form, your posture, and everything. You soften, you drop it, and then you go deep. Well, we can't do that as people of color in a white space if you don't feel safe. So
Yeah.
you're just going to have the technique, but you're going to hold it with tension, and you're not going to really feel safe enough to be like, oh, I could get my healing here. You know what I mean? So that's really important. So having a all BIPOC space, folks can roll up, have the form, have the skills, soften because they feel safe, drop in and get the healing because they can, and you have other fellow BIPOC folks having, hands-on healing on you because some folks will not feel comfortable with white people touching their bodies for all kinds of reasons, you know?
I think as me, for example, I live in Harlem, right? If someone
Yeah,
is triggered by being white, I cannot take it personally. I have to respect that. And
right,
I have to be very respectful because it's trauma, right? Like, so I
right,
cannot, and I think that is something as a person, like we have to start understanding that and respecting it. In my
right,
in my sense, like if you speak Spanish, I open up. It's very
right. It's
like
very natural, right? It's
for
organic. You
me,
just
it's
like,
a language thing. I
yeah,
feel like you speak Spanish. I'm like, I'm one of you, right? Like
yeah,
it
yes,
doesn't
yeah,
matter because we're obviously a bunch of countries. We're very diverse people, but there is something in the heart that Spanish
yes,
opens the key to my heart. So in my way, it's a
yes,
different experience. But
yes,
I feel safer if you speak Spanish to me. I will be
yeah.
much more loud, laugh, and I will just
Be
open up.
yourself. You'll be more yourself.
I'll be more myself, right? It's a very
Yeah,
strange, like it's so we have
yeah,
that, and I think it's great for everybody to identify which space do I feel safe, without judgment, without anything. And that's where I train and that's where I do my healing without
Yes.
anyone commenting or anyone, or like, there is no issue. Like, just allow, as you said, you were waiting for the right teacher. It ended up being in Geneva. That,
Yes.
like, I think that is the beauty of this. The more Reiki teachers there are, the more diverse, then everybody can feel a space or where they feel safe.
Right. And that's why I want to train and teach as many,
Yeah,
students of color as possible, so that the diaspora of that just spreads far and wide, because then
absolutely.
those folks take their teachings and their ways and their practice to their respective communities that would never otherwise not, have even had any exposure to it, and so I feel like the 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 offerings that I've made have touched other students of color to go into their communities and reclaim their own ancestral healing, like
Oh,
there's like many. I'm noticing, like, with each training there's more and more Japanese
wow.
American. Yeah, because a lot of them don't speak
Well,
Japanese.
it's
Yeah,
also
a
the
lot of them.
background.
Huh?
It makes sense. Like, they will feel like, yeah, it's perfect. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And plus, and I'm also queer. So I have like queer Japanese Americans, signing up, and they feel that they feel like they've come home, and there's a sense of
Oh,
like a healing that they're getting that they wouldn't otherwise get just by merely being in this container, because I crack jokes and I say things in Japanese, or, whatever. Right. So there's things that they learn that are like, they just appreciate it, and then they're like, afterwards they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize this was the healing that I even needed. I've had people say that just merely because they were just
beautiful.
there, and one of the big aspects was like, oh, now I can connect with my grandmother because I can't speak it, but now I can go home and I could give her reiki, right? So,
Oh,
as you know, Japanese people, we don't necessarily, everything doesn't need to be said. It's in the in between spaces, it's in the pauses, in the silences. Sometimes that's more potent than any damn word you can say, But here you come with, you can't speak the language, but you bring Reiki and you do hands-on healing, and it's a quiet practice. It's a subtle practice, but that connection that wasn't there before is now there, and it's such a profound healing for everybody
oh,
in
that
that moment,
was so gorgeous.
right?
Yeah, that is
Yeah, so
beautiful.
there's this ripple effect by merely just by catering to a BIPOC community, that's taught by a teacher who's also BIPOC, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So it goes out in so many different ways. Yeah, there was another student, she was Filipina. She was going in this one direction at work, and then she just was like, well, I had a Reiki session, and my Reiki practitioner, she was taught by you, and she said I should go to your training. So she just, on a whim, she went, and it changed her life. She is now this amazing Hilo practitioner. It's like a Filipino indigenous healing arts practitioner. So she incorporates that with Reiki. But she wouldn't have gone to Hilo if she didn't go through Reiki. So sometimes I feel like Reiki is a portal, or it's an opening oftentimes to other spiritual practices. It's a huge opener, you know?
Well, it's coming back to your true self, right? To your true essence. So it's the first step. And sometimes you can just practice Reiki and go deeper, or you can actually find the one that is the right fit. I love this Reiki because also, like I think, like Reiki leads you. There is this, that's Mrs. Takata saying, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it leads you to what it is. Maybe because now it's trendy and more easy available. You start with Reiki and then you realize, no, I want to practice my Filipino traditional things, or if you're Latin American, perhaps a Latin American native healing system. I find that lovely.
Yeah, because it's a portal, it's a way to get back to your true self. So
Yes.
then you have to answer the question, well, who am I? What is my true self? Oh, my true self is like, oh, I'm Filipina, or whatever that truth is that you weren't living up until that moment. And then
Yeah.
Reiki gave you the opportunity to go, oh, wait a minute, this is my truth. So whether it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna leave my job, or I'm gonna leave my boyfriend, like these are all very typical, common consequences of taking Reiki, right?
Yeah, yeah. We should put a caveat like you may leave the partner that you're not happy with after this training. We should put a
Yeah.
like caveat with that.
Yeah, you should at the bottom of a footnote. Oh, by the way,
We're not
side
responsible
effects.
for breakups.
Say that again. What?
We're not responsible for breakups, change of
Right,
jobs.
right. You will assume that these are the liabilities, but
Yeah.
it's true, because then it wakes you up to your true self.
Yeah.
So, you know.
We should don't take this training if you're getting married in the next 2 weeks, just in case.
Yeah, exactly. If you hadn't had a come to Jesus moment with yourself yet, and you're going to take this training, just
No, I love that. I just think I'm so grateful for you sharing your experience. Um, as a last question, I ask every person, because obviously you have so much experience and so many stories to share. But you also have done some oops, right? Like, even though we all learn through these teachable lessons. So I ask everyone to share their oops.
yeah, the oops. You know, there's a Singlish, you know, Singaporean English. Uh, they add la at the end of everything. Not everything, but okay la is like a real popular one. But I have oopsie la. So my oopsie la,
I love that. I'm stealing
of,
that from you.
of which I have many. Oh my God, which one should I pick? Which oopsie la? Let's see. There's been this is okay. This oopsie la is more about not following your intuition, right?
That's a good
And
one. Yeah.
yeah. So there was this moment when I was getting ready, getting one cohort ready. And there was this one particular student who I had already clocked as she was kind of a nervous Nelly. It's during COVID, you know, people are already tripping out as it is, you know, with like all the things that it was bringing up. And she wanted to call a Zoom meeting and just meet everybody. And you know, and her friend was asking me, who was my assistant, oh, is it okay if such and such a person, you know, we all do a Zoom meeting together so we get to all meet each other? And I thought, oh, that's a good idea, sure, why not? And I was also in the midst of like getting ready and preparing for the training, so I was very like in another world and just kind of
Yeah.
and also exhausted. So I kind of flippantly said, yeah, sure, no problem. You guys could have a meeting and, you know, meet each other, sure, you know, and I'll have one of my other students, you know, coordinate and facilitate. And then close to the meeting date, I heard word that this person wanted to do the Zoom meeting because of COVID, and she wanted to make sure everybody was like following protocols. And mind you, I have like a huge spreadsheet and one whole tab dedicated to COVID protocols, and they were very, very, very strict. So I was like thinking, well, why is she, you know, calling this meeting when we have all these, you know, protocols, you know, in place? And I found out right before she wanted to do the Zoom call that she wanted to basically, what I interpret as instill fear in everybody when everybody was already, you know, feeling pretty, you know, trepidatious about the whole thing. So at the last minute, I had one of my students go in there, one of my assistants, to really take over the meeting. And there was a bit of a discomfort during that time. And then afterwards, I heard from other students who were on that Zoom call, they felt like, uh, that, oh, maybe they shouldn't go to the training. You know, they had like a fear in their heart, you know, like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't go. So that was I mean, luckily everybody came, but you know, I had some insight about not letting that meeting happen, and I let it go. I was
Yeah.
just flippantly like, oh yeah, go for it. So that's something that I really need to like rein in. And you know, when I get a hit, I really need to follow it. I really need to follow it.
I love that this upsila, as you say, just came after, like, you have to feel safe to be able to heal. And this person instilling fear really could get it. Like, it sounds like a small thing, but it could get in the way of everybody else's healing process and journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, here we are days before the training, and she's freaking other people out. And it's interesting because I don't know how it played out, because the day of the training, I'm already, you know, I'm on the land already, and I'm getting all these texts, and all these people are changing their minds. Because okay, yeah, so you know, yeah, interesting, right? So there's okay, and there's also a fire burning, because this is when the California fires are going on. So there's, you know, this COVID, and there's two huge fires nearby, so the air is
No.
kind of smoky. Oh yeah, all kinds of things going on. Oh, this is okay, this is what I did follow my intuition. Okay, this is the counter to the oopsie law. So all these things are going on, and I call the fire department and talk to the fire chief, and I say, hey, you know, the smoke here is kind of intense. You know, I have a training going on. I know it's like, you know, at least 50 miles away, but you know, the smoke is kind of, I'm starting to see it and smell it. Do you think it's a good idea to continue with the training? And I'm thinking to myself, or should I cancel it? You know, because I want people to be safe, right?
Yep.
And so he's like, well, I can't tell you either way, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, what about if it was your family and they were here in this location, blah, blah, blah. He goes, oh yeah, probably not. And I was like, oh shit.
Oh,
Yeah. So then that's when I had to have my come to Jesus moment, right?
yeah.
And I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? And so I also I tend the sacred fire for my Sundance community. So I have a relationship with fire. So, and I have a relationship with prayer. And, you know, so I got down and I like dropped in and I was like, should I do the training or not? Should I do it or not? Should I go forward with it or not? You know? And I got a strong yes. And I said, we're doing it. It's on. And then here comes all the calls like, oh, one person's like, oh, my dog sitter just quit on me and my dog doesn't have a dog sitter. And then I had another person say, oh, I'm in my car and, oh no, I just packed the car. And she's a nurse at this hospital. And she's like, I just got a call from my colleague and someone in our department tested positive. Marie, should I come or should I not come? You know? And I said, okay, get quiet, sit with yourself. Do you feel like you have COVID? And she's intuitive. And she's like, no, I don't have this. And she's crying during this whole time explaining this to me because she's packed the car, she's ready to go. And, you know, and I'm like, okay, if you don't think you have it, I said,
Just mask. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everyone's mask. Oh, it's mandatory.
Yeah.
You know, testing, masking, all the things, testing
Perfect.
twice even. I mean, I was a little over the top. Now that I look back.
Well,
But
yeah,
anyway, everything was over the top. COVID time, everything over the top. Everything's over the top. Okay. Everything's over the top. So I said, Jen, get in your car and just drive. And she's crying. Look, I'm getting in the car now. And then the dog person, she got another, she was carpooling with another person who had a dog watcher as well. So the dog sitter sat her dog. And so everything came together. Another person was tripping out because she was just in the fire and she didn't want to go through another fire. She was traumatized. She came because everybody brought big air purifiers. So we made it all happen. Nobody got COVID. Nobody like died of smoke or was, you know, impacted by it. So that with all those things, I followed my intuition. Everything said no, and everybody else was having their resistances, but they all came together. And guess what? That made the container so deep, so fast.
I can imagine.
I mean, it felt like that training was like a year. Everybody was like, wow, that felt like a year. Like, because everybody went through so much in a short amount of time.
That's good.
So anyway, that's the anti-oopsie law story.
But it's perfect lesson. So I make a drawing for every guest, and I did yours, and I don't know if you can see it.
Wow, look at that, Natalie.
So it was big one with the tree, and you know those trees are like willows that have like these, but it was the tree, but it also was a rain of stars. So I imagine you and the tree, and almost like the branches were made of like these kind of like star, very crystal.
You incorporated my name, Morohoshi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Star Nation. That's Morohoshi.
Oh, yeah, we talk about it. Yeah. So, but it felt like literally they were raining on you, and you were on the canopy of a tree with the very deep roots. And I'll be sending that to you.
Oh, I'm gonna have to incorporate that in my curriculum now.
Well, it's yours to do whatever you want with those drawings. I let them go. So I scan them, so I may post about it a little, but it's your drawing to do what you want.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. I love it. Thank you for that lovely exchange.
Thank you. It's the least I can do. You're taking the time to share all your beautiful wisdom. So I'm really grateful for that and having this wonderful conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for spreading the light and being that beacon. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I'll be adding, obviously, your link so people can reach out to you for trainings and just ask about more information. And hopefully may your practice expand and expand and expand and touch the hearts of many, 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 many hundreds or thousands of people.
Yes, all of us. We're all doing it together.
Yes, we're interconnected. So just by being
all doing it together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Marie.
Yes, thank you, Natalie.